Welcome to Lyme Time. I'm Allie from the Tick Chicks. We are all more than Lyme disease and chronic illness, and together we stand with you to overcome and rise. I'll bring you closer to the experts in cutting-edge treatments and even a few unexpected ways of healing. I'll ask the questions you want answers to regarding Lyme disease and successful ways of getting you closer to 100%. We are in this together and will not be defined by Lyme.
All right, so welcome to Lyme Time. Today, my guest is Justin, who I guess I met over social media, Instagram. His Instagram handle is Justin is not a doctor. And I really responded to how he conducts his Instagram and how passionate he is about changing lives and changing mindset and being super proactive within your own journey and helping you decode and demystify a lot of ingredients on labels, a lot of just things that we are doing within our own homes every day, within our diets, and really understanding that you can control a lot of what is going on symptomatically through just doing some research on your own. He's an everyday guy, and I'm so excited to have him here just to share a little bit about his journey and also how he got to where he is now, which is to embark on a journey of now helping others. So Justin, welcome to Lyme Time.
Thank you, Allie. I really appreciate it, and I'm certainly excited to be here.
I want to start by talking about your own personal journey, and I don't know how far it goes back, but I'd like to just start there. How did you get to where you are today?
So this is, unfortunately, it's not a simple question. This goes way back for me. So this goes back to when I was in my parents' basement every day, when I was a teenager, because we found out much later on that there was mold down there. So I won't get to that right now. But, when I was a junior in high school, I was diagnosed with mono, and I was out of school for 2 months. Before that, I hadn't been treating my body that great. I got into partying when I was way too young, and this is another topic as well. That probably contributed to my body's inability to deal with certain things, But, I wasn't treating my body that well, and I thought it made sense that I had a mono diagnosis because, I was just overworking my body, and it was explained to me that, that kind of thing can happen from just, overworking yourself. I was all over the place. I was extremely active socially, but I also wanted to be a good student. So I was on, every spectrum possible, and I was just, not focused on health. The funny thing is, at that time, I was spending a lot of time. This might sound weird, but I was spending a lot of time like in the woods. We would build fires and stuff like that, me and my friends, and we would do that late at night and stuff like that. So I just remember that after that mono diagnosis, which, we don't know if it was actually a correct diagnosis or if there was, other things going on top of mono. But I never really fully recovered from that. I just remember, when I finally went back to school, just thinking, man, like I don't feel the same. I just never got the same vibrance back that I did. So, I just went on, about my life as a kid would do, and I just started to think that, maybe I'm just shot, maybe I did too much partying. And I started when I was too young. I started partying when I was in 8th grade. And this is stuff that I want to make sure that I say because, I find it so funny because like I used to be the type of person that would say, and it's true that it's total BS. Like, drugs aren't going to kill you. Alcohol is not going to kill you. Um, that stuff is a bad message to send because, kids know that it's not true, right? Like if you lie to kids, they're not going to listen. And that was my mentality, was like, alcohol is not going to kill me. Drugs aren't going to kill me. If I mess around with some, lightweight things, these things aren't going to affect me. But the truth that I know now is that overload on my body contributed to long-term health problems that my body wasn't able to deal with because of the strain I was already putting on my body. So that's a message that I want to get across.
It's very important, just to interject in here.
Yeah.
Extremely important for people to understand how much the wear and tear affects your immunity, and how it just starts, decreasing your ability to react in a positive way. I want to ask you though, before that point, before you got mono, had you had anything else in your past that signaled that you were sensitive or overloaded in any way? Were you just a normal guy?
Yeah. So actually, I developed. It's hard for me to remember at this point. I think it developed around the same time that I was diagnosed with mono, that I started to get bouts of extreme anxiety, panic attacks. I had panic attacks throughout college, which, people, my friends around me wouldn't have even known, because I was very good at hiding it. And I also, I should say, dealt with extreme insomnia. So, and this is something that I haven't talked about on my Instagram with my massive 250 followers. But this is another thing that I really want to talk about, is insomnia. I don't know where that came from. It sort of hit me, at some point when I was in high school. Again, I think it was around the same time. The whole thing's kind of a blur to me, because at the time I wasn't thinking about it too much. At the time, I loved life so much. It's weird to say, but I was an extremely happy kid. I loved school. I loved hanging out with my friends. And I thought that I just couldn't sleep at night because, I was just this very hyperactive individual. But thinking back to it, I think all of these things are related.
Sure.
I think the insomnia, the anxiety, the monodiagnosis. So if I could fast forward a little bit, I went through college okay. Like, I didn't feel great throughout college, but I sort of, I was just the type of individual that just like put how I felt to the side, and I just like, drank enough beers that I could hang out with people. And but my hangovers were horrific. I mean, that's another thing. That's another sign that your body is overloaded with toxins and chemicals when, my friends would, we would drink the same amounts, me and my friends, and they would wake up and be fine. And like, you get the hangover, like, oh, I have a headache, but then, they would say, oh, well, once I get, go get a bagel and a water, I'm fine. And then we would be able to go off and do the next thing. And, at that age, you can typically bounce back very quickly. We know everybody gets hungover, but my hangovers were like ridiculous, so like just loss of functionality. My whole next day would be shot. So, after college, I continued to sort of just ignore it. But then it got to a point where I stopped doing all these things. I gave up the going out with my friends on Fridays and Saturday nights. I gave up doing a lot of things, not that, again, a huge thing that I want to make clear is I was never like a junkie or somebody who was like over abusing alcohol. I'm talking about using alcohol in the same way that normal college students do, and
Sure.
young people do, um, and experimenting with drugs here and there. I'm not talking about anything crazy. I was always a good kid, just doing things that other kids do. I stayed in great physical shape. I was always exercising. I was always working out to the extent that I could. I would be exhausted after I'd work out, but I would do it anyway. But around when I was 23, 24, again, it's kind of a blur. I was just like, you know what? Like something's not working here. Something's not right. I started going to my doctor all the time, my primary doctor, and I'm going to try to speed this up. But, my primary doctor was telling me, you're perfectly healthy. Nothing's wrong with you, blah, blah, blah. He said, just, reduce your alcohol, reduce your caffeine. And I'm like, doc, I'm not going out anymore. I'm not drinking at the bars anymore because I don't even have energy to make it to the bar anymore. And, it was almost like he didn't believe me. He looked at me, I looked good, I looked healthy. That's the other thing when people tell you, oh, you look fantastic. That I'm sure you've dealt with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely are standing there looking at another individual going, I barely am standing here, and
Yep.
yet I look normal to you.
Yep.
Especially women, I think, I would have dark circles.
Same.
Whenever I go into an episode, I get these really dark circles under my eyes. But,
Yep.
I have makeup. And if I had to be somewhere at like a client dinner or doing something like that, you just show up and you just get through it. But no, nobody would ever really have known by just looking at me on the outside.
Right. So that was something that really frustrated me. And I had people telling me that, oh, you're really stressed. You're probably stressed out, and stress can cause these problems. Stress can cause fatigue. Stress can cause muscle aches. Stress can cause headaches. I was waking up every day with a splitting headache, and I wasn't drinking any alcohol. When you wake up every day with a splitting headache, I'm sorry, but that's not normal. But at the time, again, I just kept coming back to the fact of, maybe this is just how it is. Maybe, I can't wake up in the mornings. Maybe genetically, I need a lot of sleep. I needed like 10 hours of sleep at night, every night. And if I didn't get 9 to 10 hours of sleep, I was shot. I was just shot. And, when I'm a very ambitious person, I've always been. And what really got to me, I don't want to jump ahead if you were going to ask this question, but what really got to me was my inability to perform in jobs that I took. And I had to quit several jobs, because I couldn't handle the energy that it took. In one job I was commuting. I live in New Jersey, right outside of New York City, and I was commuting into New York City, and that's a very intense commute. It's 1.5 hours each way. When you add a demanding job on top of that, most ambitious young kids can handle that, right? But I couldn't. So when I had to quit a job, that's when I was like, this is effed up. This is something's effed up. Like, I don't care what my doctor's telling me. I don't care what my friends and family are telling me. I look great. Something's wrong. And it was really eating at me. Finally, I spoke to a friend from college, a female friend who, she said, you know what, you sound like you have a lot of the similar problems to me. And I was diagnosed with Lyme disease. And she referred me to a doctor that was very, literate in Lyme. And I actually still see this doctor to this day. She's an internal medicine doctor, and, she's very familiar with Lyme. And we sent my blood out to a specialty lab in California, which, I had already previously been tested with the regular Western blot, many times, and tested for a bunch of the ordinary things, and that test came back positive. And I started learning about Lyme and about how, I started finding out about other people that I knew through my network, that dealt with Lyme. And so I started learning a lot about it. I was also diagnosed with a co-infection of Lyme called Bartonella, which a lot of people don't know that. I feel people aren't really, knowledgeable about the co-infections that very often are attached to Lyme, but could require different type of treatment. So yeah, do you want me to stop there? Is that it? I don't know if I'm.
That's good. I mean, I love the story, sort of leading up to that. And then you got the diagnosis with Lyme, which, it sounds so weird, but so many people say, thank God, because I have been searching and searching and searching for whatever was wrong in my blood. and now I have found it. And so it's a double-edged sword, because you have something that you're going to be living with for a very long time, and yet there is a profound relief in being able to label it and get to work on the treatments. So did you try antibiotics first?
I did. And so that's the very first thing that my doctor wanted to do, um, despite the fact that, it was like, well, I clearly have had Lyme disease for a long time, and based on the personal research that I've done, antibiotics are not very effective unless you catch Lyme like in the very early stages. Now, as I say on my Instagram, I'm not a doctor, so this is just stuff that I'm reading, and very basic knowledge that I have is that antibiotics don't work unless it's very early stage. Once it gets into the chronic stage, as we know, the Lyme really digs into your blood and into your organs and hides, and it's like a very smart bug. So it's very hard to kill it off with antibiotics, but nevertheless, my doctor wanted to put me on antibiotics. And, one thing is, I did notice feeling horrendous after I started taking the antibiotics, which is, I was probably definitely herxing to an extent, which, I'm sure you've explained to your audience what herxing is, but, that's supposedly when you're killing off the bugs and they're releasing the toxins.
It's a violent reaction when you start antibiotic treatment, and it actually, yes, it resurfaces the Lyme symptoms. And so it makes going on antibiotics extremely difficult. So
yeah. So at that age, I didn't really know what was going on. I was just listening to my doctor, and after about 3 months, I was just feeling horrific. Nothing was improving, and at that time, I was just like, I had no patience. I was just like, I gotta find, a different doctor. I gotta figure out what's going on here, or just give up on this because this isn't working. So I ended up getting referred by a friend's stepfather who was dealing with it, that was seeing one of the most renowned Lyme doctors, who happens to be right near where I lived. Went to see her, and she also wanted to put me on antibiotics, but she was the one that actually introduced me to the fact that I also had Bartonella. So she put me on different antibiotics.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up doing antibiotics in total between both doctors for about a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did you feel immediately getting off of them, and then a few months down the road? What was your stages?
Well, when I first started the round of antibiotics, I remember feeling worse. When it got to about, after the first 3 months, I would say I just noticed no difference, no positive or negative. So, and the thing is, I had so much going on in my life that it was hard to differentiate, what was due to the antibiotics and what wasn't. So overall, I have no idea if, to this day, I don't know how much of an effect the antibiotics had as far as killing off, Lyme bugs and Bartonella bugs.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly could have contributed heavily or mildly. I just have no clue.
So about 6 months after the antibiotics, would you say your symptoms had decreased, or did you still basically have a version of what you had before you started the antibiotics? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So with me, and I want to be really careful because I really don't know how many people could maybe have life-changing effects from antibiotics. So everything that I say, I want to be really careful. I just want to say, for me personally, and the second Lyme doctor that I saw, she told me almost definitively, she was like, yeah, I think your monodiagnosis when you were a junior in high school was actually Lyme, and it went undiagnosed. And that led to you having Lyme for almost 10 years now, undiagnosed. So, when you're almost at a decade in with Lyme, and again, apparently, antibiotics aren't going to be that effective. So I just want to say that just for me personally,
Sure.
at the end of the day, I didn't really see a positive effect from antibiotics, unfortunately.
And let me ask you how your parents were during all of this and how your family, was reacting, because I know that there are a lot of younger adults listening to this who may or may not have the support of their family. And I'm just curious to know because, as a parent, if you're hearing complaints about this kind of thing from your otherwise active and completely energetic child, how did that relationship go along the journey with you?
Yeah, so it's an interesting journey because, when I was young and I would complain about not feeling well, my dad never really got involved in any of this. He's just the type of guy that, like, he doesn't, like, you try to talk to my dad about, gluten or something, like, he's like, what are you talking about? Like, so this was always like, I'll just refer to this to my mom, because my mom's always been the one that was involved in my health and actually receptive to what's going on.
Sure.
So, yeah, my mom, she would always say, well, look at what you're doing. You're partying all the time, this and that. And I would say, yeah, but it's different. Like, my friends don't feel the same way that I do. Like, so we went through that, and, people around me thought that I was like a hypochondriac, including family members. No joke. People thought that I was a hypochondriac. I don't hold any grudges about it. It's understandable to an extent, because these just aren't things that are known mainstream. And but down the line, my mom realized that something was definitely wrong, and she was in full support. My dad's always in support too. He's not the type of guy that wasn't supportive. And my mom was going with me on doctor's appointments and stuff like that. And when I got the Lyme diagnosis, yeah, my mom was really relieved, as I was, because she knew. Well, so I got to backtrack. The reason I was relieved when I got that diagnosis, as you may be familiar with, is it's just like, you would think that you would be upset that you got a diagnosis, but when you went so many years not knowing what the hell is going on, when you get a positive diagnosis, that's like, at the moment I was like, wow, this is amazing, because now I have an answer and now I can fix it.
Yeah.
What I didn't realize was that it's not easy to fix. That I figured out later.
Yeah, I also had mono when I was in the 7th grade, a pretty bad case of mono, and I had chicken pox before that, and I even got shingles when I was 17. Like, I just sort of guess I had that genetic willingness of my body to sort of attach itself to different things along the way. But yeah, I think you're right. When you get the diagnosis and then you read a little bit about Lyme disease, it all started making sense to me, all of it. And then you load in there the EBV or mono, whatever it is for you, and it just all really, really makes sense. So that's the relief. The struggle is in the fact that, with a cancer diagnosis or some of the other really big illnesses, you have a protocol. Whether that or not that's healthy or not healthy is a different situation, but I agree with you. It's a double-edged sword getting the actual diagnosis. Let's talk about being a young adult male within society. I mean, it's hard enough to convince your family members what's going on, and when you don't have an answer, it's hard to be in limbo and be wondering. So you start wondering aloud. And you think that your family is going to be there and understand you because they've known you your whole life. They know you're not like this, right? Mm-hmm. But we start talking about it. And I'm just wondering what it's like with your peers and what it has been like throughout the years with friends and being, being not being what you're supposed to be, which is, super cool, macho, going, never saying no to anything and all of that. How has that worked in your life?
Yeah, this is a big one because, I think that particularly when you don't have an answer as to why you don't feel well, that doesn't help. Like when you tell people, as I mentioned, I've just always been socially active. So, my friends would expect me to be engaging in certain activities. And again, I forced myself to do that for a long time, but eventually I just stopped. And so, it definitely, hurt some of my friendships because people didn't understand. People didn't know why I had stopped. It's like, well, I want to hang out with my friends, but if all we're going to be doing is drinking alcohol, then, that's not going to work for me anymore. So that's a big thing that, can take a toll emotionally. You just feel like, well, man, this sucks, and I can't really explain it properly. I don't know why I don't feel great, but I'm just not up to it. And I, can't engage in these activities anymore. And yeah, you don't even want to tell people that, like, oh, I'm not feeling good, and my body is hurting. People, when you're 23 and you have body pains all over, which is what I had, which is, my whole body was hurting. I had headaches, I had brain fog, just confusion, dizziness, just getting up off the couch, boom, dizzy, like really dizzy. Um, and yeah, you just, you feel like you're supposed to be a young, healthy man, and men don't, complain about things. And it's, it's tough,
It's
but
it's really tough. That's a tough one because it's almost like Lyme disease is an umbrella, but what is coming off of each aspect of Lyme disease is depression, isolation. When you really don't want to go out drinking with your buddies, you do miss out on a bit of social interaction and
yep,
meeting other people. And that's kind of a normal-ish type way of meeting people when you're a young adult, is going out to the
yep,
bars and stuff.
it
So
is
I imagine that created a whole second layer of emotional depletion for you.
for sure. And stress, well, especially when it came to work. I mean, when I had to quit a job that I had in New York City because I couldn't handle the commute and the pressure of the job, I was embarrassed. I felt like I was a loser, but I was like, well, why can't I do this? Am I just not, uh, am I missing something genetically? Like, why am I not able to why am I not able to hold down a regular job? Like, so you start thinking about all these things, and that makes you stressed. And what makes you even more stressed is when the doctor tells you nothing's wrong. So
Yeah, I have been there many times. I remember going into the doctor and being in so much pain and being barely able to sit on the table. I mean, because I had such bad kidney pain. And, at first it sort of started migrating around my body. I don't know if anybody else out there experienced this, but it was sort of like lodge in a certain part of my body and just keep going around and around and around. And it was extremely stressful. And yet nothing, no test was coming up with anything. And they just finally said, I think it's a pain disorder. And I was like, no, it's not.
oh,
It's
nice.
just really not.
Yeah.
Being your own advocate is huge. So let's, so you had the diagnosis of Lyme and a few viruses along the way, I should say. And then you started working with an LLMD, a Lyme literate doctor. And what would you say was your first sign that you were making a turn for the better?
So, well, the doctor that I ended up seeing, okay, well, I actually have a funny story, and I can make it really quick. Where I started, I actually never turned the corner through a doctor. I turned the corner through doing my own research. And that's why I'm such a big advocate of being your own doctor. You know, nobody's more motivated than you are to figure it out. So I just, for a while I gave up, after the antibiotics didn't work, I gave up, for several years. I would say I was diagnosed when I was around 25, and I took the antibiotics until when I was around 26. And then when I was 26 and 28, I was just like, screw it. I'm not, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to give up. But then I went back to a period where I started, I was like, I can't deal with this. I feel like hell all the time. I need to start looking into this again. So I started just being really vigilant about seeing different doctors. I started trying to see, thyroid doctors, right? I was just like, oh, maybe something's wrong with my thyroid. So one day I was Googling thyroid doctors. I came across this doctor who, I ended up seeing him, and he doesn't just specialize in thyroid, he specializes in a lot of different things. And this guy was he was a chiropractor. He wasn't really a doctor, but he was doing a lot of functional medicine stuff. And I went to this guy for a free consultation. I never used his services because this guy, so I find it really funny. I don't know why, it might just be funny to me, but he was more of a business guy than a doctor. And I could tell immediately when I walked in, he had a really fancy suit on, and he was presenting me with these packages and telling me, he's like, I'll have you healed in 3 months. And he's like, I have the bronze package, the silver package, and the gold package. Right. And he's like, if you do the bronze package, I'll have you pretty good. If you do the silver package, you'll be even better. And then if you do the gold package, you'll get access to some of my electromagnetic pulse machines, whatever he's talking about, and this and that. So I never saw him because these packages were like $10,000 and above. But in that consultation, he mentioned some very key words that I took away that changed my life. So all it took was a free consultation where he said the terms autoimmune. Now at this time I was about 26, I was 27, 28. I had never heard the term autoimmune before. I didn't know what that meant. Now that's a problem. How come my primary doctor had never talked to me about autoimmune? Why has no other doctor that I've seen ever, why am I just hearing about autoimmune for the first time? So this is part of what contributes to my distrust of the whole conventional medicine system. That's a separate thing. Another term was inflammation. Mm-hmm. The first time, he talked about how inflammation is the cause of like every disease known to mankind. Like it all comes back to inflammation. And he was talking about the gut-brain connection, and basically how the gut, is the center of your health. And so he said all these things. And now I went home and I started Googling these terms, and I started learning about all this stuff. And I eventually read about what was called the autoimmune paleo diet, where, it's an elimination diet. You're cutting out, the idea behind the elimination diet is to cut out any possible foods that could be causing problems, in terms of inflammation, or if you're sensitive to them in any way. The idea behind it is to cut out all possible things. Now, I know everybody's different. Like some people have problems with red meat, and red meat's actually allowed on the elimination diet. I know some people have problems with coconut's allowed on the elimination diet. So everybody needs to kind of figure out what works for them. But when I went on this elimination diet, where I cut out gluten, grains in general, dairy, eggs, legumes, beans, seeds, it's pretty much, you're eliminating like all processed food. So you're eating like all organic. You're cutting out caffeine, you're cutting out alcohol.
And what about dairy? Did you say dairy? Sorry.
I believe I said dairy. I hope I did, because that should be on the top of the list.
Okay.
Now, the only reason I did this diet is because I read about it, and it was talking about, and this doctor that I saw had mentioned inflammation, and it was just everything that I was reading was saying that this could help. So I did it, and I'm not kidding you, within 48 hours, my life changed. It was just, whoa, I feel totally different. Like, I feel sharp mentally. I feel like I don't need 10 hours of sleep. Um, my body pains went away. My headaches pretty much went away. Now, I'm not going to say like I was all of a sudden the epitome of health. That's far from true. But what is true is that all of the symptoms that were stopping me from living a normal life, to the full extent that I felt I should have been, was pretty much gone. And so that's the turning point for me. And what that led to was me just having a lot of curiosity as far as like, well, why do I feel so much better on this very strange diet? Like, something's happening here. I don't know what. Like, I don't know how this is really connected to Lyme disease. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. So I started just looking into it, and in the end, I do believe it's connected to Lyme disease because it has to do with just reducing overall toxic burden on your body and allowing your body to have the strength to deal with its immediate battles. But at the end of the day, I just, curiosity led me to seeing more functional medicine doctors, not the guy that wanted to charge me 10,000, but other more affordable people, who started giving me, I had a doctor that I really liked that was giving me herbs for a while. Like I was like a mad scientist. I had like, 20 bottles of liquid herbs, which I think they helped. I did, concoctions of liquid herbs for like a year. And, I was taking chlorella. She diagnosed me with, high levels of heavy metals. We did heavy metals tests. We did mold. I had high levels of mold. Like I said, high levels of heavy metals. I started going on, active detoxes. So, but to answer your question shortly, the turning point was that, when I learned about the elimination diet.
Yeah. It's huge. And what's interesting is a lot of times I'll post about food and diet, and it typically gets like the lowest engagement on my platforms.
That's probably why I have no followers.
And to be fair, when I was going through everything and in so much pain, my entire body, I could barely have the sheets over me when I was trying to sleep. It was just, my nerves were just on fire. And I really probably couldn't have listened to, eliminate gluten and grains from your diet, because it just didn't make, I just couldn't see that right then and there. I was like, I had to go to a doctor a conventional way. I had to kill the bug. I had to kill the disease. The only way I could do that was through chemicals and pills that they hand you over, a prescription and all that. And it's just not something that people really are willing to accept when they're in that acute state. It's just something that they kind of get when they're in the middle of their journey. I would say, generally speaking, they kind of start, okay, my acute symptoms have settled down a bit, where right. I can now go to the next stage of my growth. And I love watching you in social media, because you make it fun. You make it, you bring such energy to it. You bring such knowledge, about being a health detective and reading the labels, and you go into real specific stuff that would have never really crossed my mind. Things that are in everybody's everyday, realm of eating and drinking and just different toxins that we're not even, the whole orange juice thing really blew my mind, because you would think that you could buy orange juice in a carton and it does say 100% natural and no added things. Tell everybody just a second of that about
yeah, well, so yeah, the funny thing is, a a lot of these informative videos that I make, I've just become obsessed with like, well, what else is out there that I need to know about what I'm putting in my body? Because again, I couldn't explain what was going on. So these are things that I'll literally just, I'll research it. And then whatever I learn, I'll put a video about it. But yeah, what I learned about the orange juice is, that they are, they're taking the orange juice, they're extracting the oxygen from the orange juice. So who knows what that leaves you with? It leaves you with something, some kind of liquid, right? And then, but the most interesting thing is then they use aspects of the orange, like the peel, I guess mainly the peel and pulp, apparently, um, to make these what they call flavor packs. Which, the funniest thing, the funniest part about it was that the flavor packs are created by companies, like the same type of companies who create fragrances for cologne and perfume, because apparently, like, depending on what country you're in, the population has a different expectation for what orange juice is supposed to taste like. And that's another thing that I refer to, is the fact that every orange juice brand tastes different. And that's because they're creating these flavor packs that are designed to taste different. Like if they're marketing an orange juice to Mexico, they'll make the flavor pack taste how Mexico wants it to taste. And they're designing it for the US, they'll make it how Americans think orange juice should taste. The bottom line is that none of them taste like how an actual freshly squeezed orange, would taste. And I can tell a huge difference in the taste. And I don't really understand it fully, but somehow chemicals end up in these flavor packs, and they're allowed to leave it out of the, the packaging and the label, because I guess it just has to do with the way they're processing the peels and converting them into these flavors. And, it's just crazy.
It is crazy. And you wonder what everybody's regulations are in different countries as well. I live in California. I go and I buy my produce, and I started noticing that certain things in the produce section didn't look the same as I was used to seeing. And, we're having a shortage in Argentina on this. And, I was like, wait a minute. I live in Southern California, where we should be growing our own oranges, and lemons and just some basic fruits and vegetables, but we're still importing so much. And I just thought that was so curious, are we paying attention to what they're doing with, I'm just saying countries in general. I'm not specifically pointing out Argentina, but I am trying to say, how do we know what's going on? Maybe it's healthier. Maybe their soils are organic and actually a healthier way. But I just thought it was really interesting how, even in this wonderful mild climate, we're still reaching out to import so much of our foods.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And you go into on your social media tips for feeling better.
Yeah.
And in addition to reading labels and paying attention to what you're putting into your body, what are some other tips that you have found helpful that you can just let us know right now?
Yeah. Okay. So the number one thing that I always say is stay gluten-free. And I pick on, sugar, dairy, and gluten. Those I call the big three. And I want to preface everything that I'm going to say by saying that I truly, truly, truly believe that everybody is different. Especially, we know that everybody is different genetically. We know that historically different cultures have ate very different diets, which in my mind, I don't know the science behind it at all. And quite frankly, I don't care. I just think of things logically. It's like if a certain culture got very used to eating a particular food, maybe their body's adapted to eating that particular food, whereas somebody else across the continent, on a different continent maybe didn't. it's really hard to explain why people have different, issues within their gut lining and why they can't handle certain things. But gluten and dairy particularly clearly are affecting a much larger portion of the population than people think or thought. Gluten free is definitely, it shouldn't be seen as like a trend to be healthier. I mean, I think people hop on the gluten free trend and they don't even know why, you know, but, especially for people that are dealing with chronic problems, um, you know, the proteins that are found, the gluten damages the lining of the gut. That's the main thing with gluten. It will cause, it can lead to leaky gut syndrome, which is a condition where your gut is actually leaking. There's holes in the gut, because your body is having so much of a problem breaking down this gluten. And apparently the gluten in America is, particularly worse. I guess it has to do with the way that they harvest it. Apparently it has like 10 times more gluten than the wheat that's grown in Europe. A lot of people apparently that come from Europe to America, all of a sudden they have problems with gluten. So, but it's clear that a lot of people can't digest it. And it's causing problems within the gut, which leads to inflammation, and inflammation leads to disease, or it at least can contribute to the beginnings of chronic disease. And a lot of people don't realize this. So, and gluten's not essential. And same thing with dairy. Dairy is not essential. A lot of people think that you need like milk to have strong bones and all this other stuff, which is turning out to not really be true, based on evidence and studies. And, the majority of the population can't properly break down lactose or, the proteins such as casein and whey. And it's just not essential for you. So when your body can't break it down, it causes inflammation. It all comes back to inflammation. And sugar is going to cause inflammation. Sugar is something that we should not be getting outside of, naturally from food. Like I really like fruit. I include fruit in my diet. And to be honest with you, I don't understand the full idea of why sugar from fruit is better. But added sugar just has no place in anybody's diet. You're just damaging first of all, you're damaging cells. There's evidence that it causes cellular damage. When you have too much sugar, it releases free radicals into the bloodstream, which is not good for you. And it can lead to insulin resistance. So this can lead to diabetes. We just don't need nearly as much sugar as people think. So I don't think anybody should be eating sugar, number one, and gluten and dairy. I would say definitely try cutting it out of your diet. So that was a really long number one, because I covered 3 things there. The next ones I'll make a little quicker. So second one I'll say is I think there's absolutely no reason to eat anything that's not organic. Now I do understand that this is very difficult to do. So, I mean, I'm just an advocate of eating organic as much as you possibly can, because, it's kind of crazy how, organic food is labeled as organic, right? Regular food is not labeled as anything. Processed food we call regular food. So regular processed food is what our culture and our society has become accustomed and conditioned to, which is really crazy if you want to think about it. Like I think it should be the other way around. I think processed food, like the majority of the food in the supermarket, should be labeled as processed item, and it should be labeled as chemicals added, preservatives added, this added, that added. Shouldn't, you know what I mean? And then organic food shouldn't be labeled at all. That's what real food is. And if you just think about this logically, why would you want all of these toxins and artificial things floating around in your bloodstream that your body has no idea what to do with? I mean, it's just insane. Like you would never, you posted something a long time ago that I responded to about, the way that you treat or you said something about if you shut down something, I was talking about how if you restart your computer, that helps for your computer to function better. People don't restart their bodies. Well, it's the same thing with what people are putting in their bodies. You would never put, for example, the wrong gasoline in your car. You wouldn't think about doing that. You'd be like, no, I can't do that. But people are constantly putting the wrong gasoline in their bodies. It's unbelievable how society has become accustomed to that as being the norm. So these toxins build up in your body, and ultimately they cause inflammation. They cause your organs to not be able to function optimally or properly. When your organs don't function optimally or properly, your body operates as a system. So if your liver is overloaded with toxins, then it's like dominoes. Other things start to fall, because the health of your liver, I've actually learned recently, is like extremely important. And
It
our
really
livers,
is. It's your only way to really detox in a big way.
yeah. So yeah, you just gotta. I think you got to get all of these artificial things out of your bloodstream if you want to avoid. Firstly, feel better immediately and avoid long-term problems. Uh, Another tip I'd like to say is, for me personally, I've found fasting in different ways to make big differences for me.
I
Now,
agree 1,000%. Love it.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. So, do you do fasting at all?
I feel like if I'm starting to feel as though either I'm sluggish, I have pain, I have I wake up with inflammation in my body, I find the quickest fix for me is to do a fast.
Yeah.
I've done variations of fasting. I've done the Prolon method. I've also done intermittent fasting, which that works for me. I
Yeah.
have never tried a water, fast. I think I could do it for 3 to 5 days, but all in all, I think everybody needs to obviously see a doctor before you start doing that. But I would say that now I'm in remission, but I wish I would have known that earlier, is that is the fastest way for me to stop all the reactions going on in my body.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, and again, I agree with you that whoever's listening to this should definitely check with their doctor. It's certainly a controversial topic, fasting, and some people's bodies just, for whatever reason, might not be equipped to deal with the types of stresses that fasting puts on your body, you know. So yeah, but fasting has increased my energy levels. Fasting has made me think more clearly, certainly while I'm fasting. I like that for when I'm working. And I've noticed that it increases my strength when I'm exercising. It makes me more capable of exercising.
I
So
think also it makes you aware of when you do go to eat something or drink something, it makes you aware of how that's reacting in your body, because you're sort of you're resetting, and so everything's sort of at ground zero. And then I could have a food, and then I would notice that the introduction of a particular food would immediately start a reaction in me. So I just know to stay away from that. It's not a it's for me, it's nothing permanent. It's just I know to stay, okay, I'm not going to do that for like 3 months, and I'm just going to give that
yeah,
part of my diet a rest. So fasting's great.
yeah, yeah. So fasting. And then I was going to say, I think that alcohol, man, cutting alcohol out for the most part, big difference. Like I said, my hangovers were horrendous. Alcohol is just really toxic to the body. I think, that's another thing that I find. It's unbelievable how certain things are just widely accepted by society, and it's almost to the point where you feel like you're an outcast if you don't take part. Not drinking alcohol is really tough. In business, it can hurt you because you might want to, if it's, meet different people and network. If you go on business meetings, whatever it is that you may do, it's so ingrained in our culture, and it can hurt your friendships, as we talked about before. So it's really a sucky thing. But if you can figure out a way to cut out alcohol and still enjoy life to the max, which is what I really promote that. I openly admit that, if you see me at a wedding or something, I'll probably be drinking because like, I still want to have fun in life. And, for major events like that, I just know that it's going to impact my body, but so I accept it. Even that being said though, I'll keep it limited. And the type of alcohol you drink is important. Like I'll just drink a small, vodka club. And I don't touch beer. I don't touch anything with sugar added, like the mixed drinks. Forget about that. I mean, that's so, we're talking about alcohol very, very limited. I think that's a huge thing. I also think I'll include this in the same one is limiting caffeine. Everybody has a kryptonite. Caffeine is my kryptonite. I haven't been able to cut out caffeine completely, but I really hope I can, man, because I know that that's a big thing that can lead to people feeling better. Just from all the research that I've done, caffeine definitely stresses the body. And depending on how healthy you are, especially your adrenal glands, your body just might not be able to handle caffeine. So that's that. To be honest with you, I had a fifth one, but I don't remember what it was right now.
Well, I mean, just going back to the caffeine, I think there's ways I kind of go around it too. There are a lot of times I go for a month without any caffeine in the morning. And then there are times where I want just, but instead of getting the latte, now I just sort of adjust it and I'll do a green tea in the morning, and that seems to be just fine. Or I'll have a latte without dairy, without, with almond milk or whatever. So, and just doing 1 cup and just really limiting that and not having it go on and on all day and things like that. So, I mean, these are great tips that our listeners can just take away immediately. And for many people out there, I want you to just really surrender to what he's saying. It's very hard to make lifestyle changes. I see people, I mean, I hate to say it, but, I see people, I follow a lot of people. And I want to learn from everybody out there. And I see people struggling with pain. But then they'll make a post about what they made for dinner last night, and it's just laden with these kinds of things. And I just want you to know that food is your fuel. And even if you have to make these changes, just take it, a month at a time or 6 months at a time, and just say, I'll go back to that maybe other way of living. But, to give it a try and to really just stay committed. Justin, if you follow him, you will have no choice but to stay committed, because every day he brings in enthusiasm and energy, just a real, just sort of no fluff and all that stuff. He's just really just bare bones. Do this, don't do that, pay attention to this. And you will notice some changes. I promise. I just can't stress it enough. So thank you so much for coming on. There's so many other things I'd love to talk to you about, and maybe we'll have you back on and go into mold and heavy metals and all of that. But thank you so much for being an inspiration to, like I say, even though you're a young adult, you've learned a lot in a short period of time that people of all ages can relate to. And your story is not very unique. It's what we have all been through. But I think you put your way of handling the situation in a very concise and direct form that many, many people can relate to. And I just appreciate you reaching out, having your passion, helping others. So thank you from our community to you. Just thank you so much. And we will be following you. Again, his Instagram is Justin is not a doctor.
That's right.
In all the right ways you would normally spell that. And thank you again. We hope to have you on soon, and we'll do a live Q&A too. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, thanks so much, Allie. I'd just like to say that it's a pleasure. I'm really glad that we got in touch, and I look forward to keeping in touch.
Thank you. Stay safe. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Stay gluten-free, everybody.